Hello, and welcome to the Designing with Love podcast. I am your host, Jackie Pellegrin, where my goal is to bring you information, tips, and tricks as an instructional designer. Hello, instructional designers and educators. Welcome to episode 124 of the Designing with Love podcast. Today, I'm joined by Maxwell Ivey, founder of the Accessibility Advantage, to talk about why accessibility matters for organizations and educational institutions and what's at stake when it's treated as an afterthought. Maxwell is also known as the blind blogger, has spent nearly 2 decades advocating for more accessible digital experiences, and he's served as an accessibility advisor to PodMatch, where we connected for today's conversation. Maxwell, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me. It's great to get to talk to you again.
So to start, Max, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and share what inspired you to start the Accessibility Advantage?
Right. So I am an almost totally blind former carnival owner and was involved in the business with my family for over 15 years. When my father passed away due to lung cancer, we weren't ready to run the carnival by ourselves, and within a few years we were out of business. I needed something to do with myself, so I did the only thing I thought I knew at that time, which was I started to help other people sell their surplus equipment, and people said I had to have a website. So in order to have a website in 2007, the only option for a blind person was to teach themselves to code HTML, which is how I got online. And as you know, having an online business, whether it's a podcast or you're selling products, there are so many things you have to learn how to do or find somebody to do for you. And people were inspired by the challenges and the way I took them on with joy. They encouraged me to share more about being a blind entrepreneur, and that led to the blind blogger, which was a name people were using for me online at the time, mainly because most people with disabilities were hiding their challenges out of fear that they would be stigmatized and they would not find success in this relatively new platform we call the internet. But, being the son of carnies, I was out there and never thought nothing about it. And recently learned that because I've been open about my disability for so long, I gave other people the freedom and the courage to put themselves out there openly with whatever disability or challenges they may have. Besides the blind blogger, I started out doing life goals coaching. People didn't want me to do that, so I started getting paid to book people on podcasts. And that kind of led me to accessibility because in 2021, Alex Sanfilippo started PodMatch. And since I was operating a service to get people booked, I was like, well, any place I can find more good shows is a good thing. But I was disappointed that it was not accessible. So started having conversations with Alex. We figured out some workarounds. I provided advice on a volunteer basis and later came on as part of the advisory board, as you mentioned. But we fixed, things as we could. And when we couldn't fix them in the short term, we came up with ways to work around them. And then I would be responsible for communicating those to existing customers or potential customers. And that's where it started. Along the way, AudioEye.com, which is an enterprise-level company in the accessibility arena, talked me into going to work as a writer for their website and later as a quality assurance person for some of their clients. And I say talk me into it because when they first approached me about going to work, I tried to talk them out of hiring me. I didn't feel like I was qualified or that I really wanted to be in accessibility, but they won me over. And for the last 4 or 5 years, I've been writing for various publications. I've done public speaking. I sing and write songs as part of my continuing growth as the blind blogger. And I even have a song called The Accessibility Advantage for my podcast now. And basically, I just keep doing the next thing. I figure out a way to overcome the obstacles. But I really wish that I didn't have to overcome the obstacles, which is why I do my best to help people understand why it is in their best interest to embrace accessibility or to improve existing accessibility. And I feel like that's the great niche for me in this whole discussion, because there's a whole lot of people approaching accessibility from the point of view of compliance, of lawsuits, of negative publicity campaigns. I'm probably one of the few that's like, let's talk about the benefits.
Right, exactly. That's great. And that leads into my next question, which is great. You tagged that really well. So
Like,
when leaders hear the term accessibility, many do think compliance, right? So what do you want organizations and even schools to understand about accessibility as a mission, risk, and opportunity? And what's the real cost of ignoring it, do you think?
right. Well, I think specifically in the educational field, the real cost of ignoring accessibility is having frustrated students and parents who are going to either complain or act out or possibly take you to court. And I hate to emphasize compliance, but sometimes compliance has to go hand in hand with the competitive advantage approach.
Right.
But really, I talked to somebody just this week who was saying, when you improve systems on your website, you have fewer people calling your customer service teams. The customer service teams are one of your highest turnover places in employment. And when employment turns over, it costs people money. So in general, when we refuse to build in accessibility in the long run, we're making things harder for our users, for the people who care about our users, but most importantly, we're making things harder for ourselves.
Right. That's so true, because when you talk about customer service, I used to work in customer service across several organizations, and accessibility wasn't really thought of during those times. It was when I was in college and then later on in life. And yeah, when I think back to those times, yeah, it's sad when there's a lot of frustration among the employees that are on the front lines, right, on the phones,
Yes,
taking
yes,
calls.
yes.
Yeah.
And the thing is, the really sad thing about that is your customer service people are in a great position to help you create an accessibility community or advisory board or whatever you want to call it, because people that have a disability that want to use your product or service, when they call in or send an email with a question or a complaint, that's an opportunity to make a connection with somebody who can help you avoid doing stuff that makes them complain, but most companies have not thought that far, and they don't have a system in place to move those questions from somebody with a disability to a particularly tasked person to address those issues. One of the things I love doing when I'm going to use a new product online is I like to reach out to the site owner through their customer service, and I'll usually send them an email like this. I'll say something to the effect of, I am a totally blind person using a computer with a screen reader. I use VoiceOver on a Mac running Safari. I'm about to start using your product or your service. I don't anticipate any problems, but if I do, hopefully we can have a conversation, or we can collaborate and figure out a way around them. And the reason
Mhm.
I do that is because most times when customer service hears from somebody with a disability, the first time they hear from us, we're angry, we're frustrated, we're complaining. So I like to connect with somebody before I need to connect with somebody.
Hello, I have some exciting news to share with all of my listeners. There is a feature called Fan Mail. What this allows you to do is send me a text message anytime during the episode. There's a link located at the top of the description in each episode, and it says Send Jackie a Text Message. So when you click on that link, you'll be able to send me a message letting me know what you thought about the episode and if you have any ideas for future episode content as well. I look forward to seeing your text messages. Thank you. Right. Yeah. Establish that relationship at the very beginning. Yeah. I like that. A lot of us don't think about that. Right.
Right.
Yeah.
Well,
That's
we're all
great.
so busy. We've all got so many jobs. I mean, you mentioned earlier that you're starting another podcast with a friend of ours, Daniel, and on true crime or cozy mysteries, excuse me. But
Sure.
every
Right.
time we do
Yeah.
something new or different, we have to learn different new things. We have to think differently, and so
Right.
there's a. I honestly don't even think it's fear anymore when it comes to embracing accessibility. I think it's just overwhelm. I think, yeah, there are
Yes.
certain people who just don't know what they don't know, but most of it is like, man, I've already got so much on my plate that I don't know how to chew, and you want me to add accessibility. Um, and I think one of the things we could really do to help business owners and educators, pretty much anybody that operates through an online portal, is get away from this me. We have to have accessibility now, and focus more on accessibility as a process or a progress. And when we can get away from the immediacy, the it has to be done now, and it has to be done the way I am telling you to do it. We can help a lot of people overcome the roadblocks or the things that are holding them back from starting down the road towards accessibility. And that's where communication and collaboration comes in, because I used to code my website for 5 years from 2007 to 2012, but I was never really good at it. I understand just enough to be dangerous or to run my website on a bad day if I have to, you know. Um, but it gives me some empathy, and it lets me understand that, look, I really don't know all that goes into building a website, even building a website on WordPress. I don't know all that stuff. I know accessibility. I know best practices. I know workflow. I know how people would, using adaptive technology like screen readers, screen magnifiers, and mechanical switch devices, navigate the internet. So
Mm-hmm.
I have to bring what I'm genius at and meet the designer, the developer, the marketer, and let them share with me what they are genius at, and then go, the objective is for somebody with a disability to be able to use this site to perform this function. How do we get there and do it without needing you to use my solution? And that's how we're going to get to more accessibility, when we can remove the fear and the overwhelm and the harsh feelings about, you're a terrible person if you're not wanting to do it the way I want to do it and do it yesterday.
Wow, that's amazing. So organizations and schools will either try to rush it, right, and not do a good
Yep.
job, or they'll delay it, right?
Yes.
So what do you see as the most common thing that organizations and maybe even schools do? Do they usually rush it and then do a poor job, or do they usually delay incorporating accessibility?
Right. I would say, depending on the size of the organization, it's generally delay. Or ignore,
Mm,
ignore. And
mm,
think about it. I went to a what they used to call a mainstream high school. That's not a term we hear much anymore.
right.
But when I went to high school, we were really new to the idea of blind people not going to a state school for the blind. And we had three blind students or visually impaired students during my entire high school career. There was a woman who graduated when I was a freshman. She went off to study interior design. There was me, and there was another guy who was a freshman when I was a graduating senior, and he had to follow behind me, and he hated me for that. But that's
Wow.
neither here nor there. But we had three visually impaired students over the course of 4 years, and we never had more than one, or really maybe one and a half at a time. So, and that was in a very large high school with a graduating class of over 1,000, student body of over 4,000, almost 5,000. We had three blind students in 4 years. So I would imagine the education system is going to be more likely to put things off and hope that they don't have to deal with it. The other thing that educational organizations are going to do, and a lot of companies are doing, and it gets them in trouble, is they expect the third party businesses that they work with to handle accessibility for them. And I imagine
Mm,
that's probably pretty common in the education arena as well, that
true.
whatever platform you're using for your online learning or to make things accessible for people with disabilities in the classroom, you're getting from a third party provider and expecting them to take care of accessibility. Would I be on the right track there?
I think you are, yes, because we have not only do we have textbook vendors that we work with, right? The big major publishers like, Cengage and all of those. But we also have what they call LTIs, which are learning integrated type of systems that go into those. So, for example, there's one called GoReact, which is a video-based platform that is utilized, and it integrates with our learning management system at the university, and it does, all of that. And so the student doesn't have to go outside of the learning management system. They can just stay right there, click on start assignment, and then they do their video and they're done with it. And then the instructor grades right in there. So it's really nice. But, it's true. We have to work with those vendors to make sure that it's accessible and it meets ADA compliance requirements.
Right. Mm-hmm. For example, these videos, do they come with audio descriptions, or at the very minimum, have the people recording the videos, have they been instructed how to give instructions so they can be followed by somebody who's visually impaired just as well as somebody who can see the screen?
That's a good question, because they're mostly, student type of assignments. So that's true. And there are students that do have those accessibility issues. So the good news is that GoReact has it built in so that it gives closed captions. Once it processes the video, it allows the closed captions and transcripts to be there. So that's good. The only thing is, and something I've actually mentioned to GoReact, is what it'll do, it won't identify who the speakers are. Now, the instructor can go in, but it'll just say speaker 1, speaker 2, speaker 3, right? In the transcript. And I'm like, I wonder if there's a way that the technology will allow you to actually get the name of the student in there, even if it's just the first name, right? And things like that. But the good news is it wouldn't violate FERPA or anything like that, because it just stays contained within that class. It doesn't go outside of it. So, but yeah, but the good news is they've got like the markers and things like that. Those are, you can have a screen reader read those markers and things like that. So it's not just color, it's not dependent upon color. So it's really good. So I'm really happy that they picked a company that not only meets the HIPAA and FERPA and all of those type of compliance areas, but also accessibility as well. So so it's really neat. So I think it's important.
You just taught me something I didn't know about my own field, and I want to thank you for that. I did not realize that in the area of education, there's not only the issue of accessibility, but there's the issue of medical privacy and then information privacy on top of accessibility. So when you consider the multiple challenges, then I think one of the things I talk about a lot would really fit in well from the side of the people with the disabilities in the education arena, which is, I feel like the fact that I've had to do so many things for myself on my website has given me a lot of empathy for what it takes for somebody to develop something to make it accessible, especially to make it accessible to screen readers, which is pretty much the hardest thing that you can do in accessibility. And so if we could show a little more empathy to the people trying to make all this happen, and, the beginning of empathy is hearing people, letting them share with you what the challenges are, so you can better understand how to participate and collaborate. So the fact that you just told me about these additional concerns will help me in the future, should somebody in the educational field want to hire me, or should I decide to pitch myself to a educational institution, either for contract work or employment. And
right.
So to share that with me.
Yes, absolutely. I think it's great when we can learn from each other. It's really, really fantastic. Yeah, it's one of those things I didn't really think about either until I got into higher education, and then about it, even accessibility, until we've mentioned offline before, where we had a blind student that was in our professional counseling program, and it really taught me a lot. It taught me that empathy that you're talking about, having empathy towards all learners, right? And that comes back to that universal design for learning, the UDL principles, right? And what those are about. Yeah. So it's really neat how there's so much involved in it, and it's more than what many people realize. So it's amazing.
Yeah. And the really cool thing about this whole universal design approach, which at this point in most industries is more aspirational than than actually being practiced on large scale. But the thing about the universal design is it will not only address accessibility, but it will make the experience for all users better as a result of considering people of all abilities in the design process.
Right, exactly. Yeah, it's interesting because I did some solo episodes about universal design for learning, and then I did one about accessibility. And what was interesting, Max, is that, as you know, screen readers were developed for blind people, right?
Yep.
And captions were developed for people that were hard of hearing or deaf. But what's interesting is that it was a good reminder when I was doing the research about the accessibility one. It talked about how even something with closed captions, transcripts can also be helpful for people that are in a noisy environment or something like that. So they don't have to necessarily have a disability. It could be that they're watching something while they're on a noisy train or something like that, and they can't hear what they're doing. So it's very interesting. Yeah,
Absolutely. There's two statistics that I've heard over the last year. One is that 37% of people under the age of 40 will not watch an Instagram or TikTok video if it doesn't have closed captions for the reasons that you just mentioned. And 85% of Facebook users will not watch a video if it doesn't have closed captions. And that's of all users.
Wow. That's amazing. I think everybody needs to know that, no matter where they work or what they do, because that's a high number.
Yeah,
wow.
Yeah. And
so they're leaving out a lot of their listeners or their users, right? Wow. That's Ooh.
Yes. Yeah. And you mentioned how things were created specifically for the blind or the hearing disabled or hearing impaired. One of the things that's just now starting to be picked up on by sighted people is audio descriptions. And that's where when you're watching a movie or a TV show, and in some cases live events, they can have a secondary audio track that will describe what's going on screen whenever people aren't talking. And right now, audio description it's mandated, but there are a lot of caveats in the law to help the television and movie providers to get there eventually without making it really, really hard on them. So I don't know what the current, stipulation is as to how many shows or how many hours a month or a quarter they have to describe. But the audio descriptions are becoming the kind of thing that sighted people are discovering, hey, if we turn on the audio descriptions, we can listen to the TV and follow along with what's going on, and we can then turn our back and go do the dishes or go outside or go to the window and look outside, or work on our computer or vacuum or whatever we want to do. As long as we can still hear the TV, we can still see the TV. So audio descriptions is one of those things that's starting to be picked up on by sighted people. And I have friends who are sighted. They're like, Max, there's some shows that even though I can see them, I can't watch them and completely understand what's going on without those descriptions,
Wow. That's amazing. Oh,
yeah.
Wow. That's cool. Wow.
Yeah.
So, Max, if you had 60 seconds with a superintendent, a dean at a school, or maybe even a CEO or department head, what would you say to convince them that accessibility needs to be part of the culture, not a last-minute checklist?
I would say that embracing accessibility shows that they have concern for everyone who will come through their system or their business, and that whether they see any positive results from that effort or not, the fact that they care enough to do it will go a long way with business partners, consumers, advocates, educators, and most especially with the search engines, the AI bots, and the things on the internet that drive traffic to our businesses. I don't know how much a educational institution depends on traffic for their success, but there's just so many good reasons to embrace accessibility, and not all of them have anything to do with being disabled.
Mm-hmm. Right. That's true. Wow. That's amazing. I love that. So here's a bonus question I think a lot of my listeners would like, because we're storytellers, right? We love to
Yes.
share stories. So can you share a story or maybe even a common scenario where a simple accessibility improvement made a noticeable difference for users and what it taught the organization?
Right. So most people already know about alternative text, where you add text to an image so that people with screen readers can know that it's there and know what it is. So that's not something that I would include in this, except people really should put the same effort into the descriptions that they put into creating them. But I would say the most important thing is make sure that I can click the button to actually hire you, book you, buy from you, sign up to you, because I can't tell you how many times I've gotten to the end of a form. So I've filled up a shopping cart and I'm ready to check out, and I've given them my credit card information. All I got to do is press one button. That one button is not coded for keyboard navigation. It's coded for a mouse. And most people using adaptive technology don't have access to a mouse. So now I'm stuck. I have to decide, do I need what's in the basket bad enough to call somebody from one of the other rooms in the house and have them do it for me? Or am I mad enough to just back out and start over and go find somebody else? Or, how do I feel about the purchase, the company, my experience? And of course, some of this just depends on how long a process it was between picking items and checking out, because some people have some very long checkout systems. But this is one of those things. It can really cost you business because very few of us don't have competitors. Nowadays, even Amazon has, even Walmart has Costco now.
Right.
So
Right.
that's the one thing. Remember that not everybody has access to a mouse button. And if you're going to set up a system where you want people to take actions, you do not want to frustrate those actions by delivering it in a manner that can't be accessed by people using adaptive technology. And the thing is, when you code things correctly for accessibility, that will also make it easier for older people who don't need accessibility but depend on keyboards more than mice, or also people who are spending a lot of time on their mobile devices. Sometimes the same button I can't click when you're visiting that website on a mobile device, you can't click it there either. And so I would say, of the one thing people don't know that they really should know, is that blind people and disabled people, most of us don't have a mouse. And so everything has to be built with keyboard navigation first.
That's so important. Wow. Yeah, we can't assume everybody has the same tools to work with, right? Yep.
This is
Absolutely.
true. And what's really interesting is a lot of times I'll go to a website and it will say this website behaves better in Chrome or better in Firefox, or sometimes it'll even say you can't use this website with Safari. And changing operating systems, say if you're going to have to switch from a Windows computer to a Mac to get better access, or switching from Safari, which is the one many of us blind people are used to Chrome, requires changing how you navigate a website to the point you go from doing things on autopilot to having to think about every step you take because somebody wasn't able to code for your favorite browser, or they decided they didn't have to, and that they decided they would just tell you to go to a different browser. That's another one of those things that's very frustrating because, like I say, you get used to the tools you have. And if somebody comes along and goes, no, you can't use that toolbox, you got to use this toolbox, it makes building things a lot harder.
So true. I was even on a government website a couple weeks ago, and the navigation, Max, was horrible. I was like, where's the log? Where do I go to learn more about things? I mean, I went to the little hamburger, icon at the top right, and couldn't even figure out how to log in or sign up or anything. And I'm like, yet they want people to have this accessibility, right? And to be able to go online and do things so that you don't have to call somebody. And get help. But yeah, it was very frustrating. I'm like, how do I go about going through here? And it just was not user friendly. It was not easy to navigate.
Yeah,
I was frustrated.
You bring up an important additional point about accessibility. Sometimes a website is accessible, but it's not understandable. And I really encourage people to put more thought into their instructions, into the language that shows up when I first get to their page, in the naming architecture they use for their menu and their headings, to put some thought into those names, because for somebody who's visually impaired, a lot of times that's all you're going to have is those names or those opening phrases of text before you have to try to navigate a website. And then with forms, it's even more so. In a form, more instruction is needed, and things that may seem intuitive to you because you can look at the screen will not necessarily be intuitive to me. And so having a way to give me good, clear instructions, and also, if I'm required to enter information, a way to know immediately that I've done it correctly or I've done it incorrectly, so that I don't have to wait till I get to the end of a page of entries to find out that 3 or 4 of them were wrong and wonder if they're actually going to tell me which ones are wrong or if I'm going to have to guess.
Oh, that's good, because, I thought that's true, because in fields, I never thought of this before. I go to fill it out and it'll tell me if something's required or I missed something, right? Yeah, it's true. It'll do red text, and now it makes me think, I wonder what they do for screen readers. To tell you that you're incorrect. For us that have the visual capability, yeah, we can see it, because it'll give that little asterisk that it's a required field, right? And then if you don't fill it in, it'll say you have 4 errors. Go fix those. But it's not always even intuitive there either, because I'm like, where's the errors? It's got to point it out to me. I need to know where the errors are so I know what to fix.
And some of them are really basic. Like, I'm sure most people wouldn't think a second thought about asking for a phone number or even a social security number and not tell me whether I'm supposed to put spaces in or not put spaces in.
Yes.
Or whether I'm supposed to use dashes or not use dashes.
Right.
That seems like a really simple thing, but sometimes that's the last thing I got to figure out. The other thing is sometimes, and I hate this when people do it, is they will put a required field on the page so that in order to get to it, I have to go past the button that says submit to find it. So sometimes I will press submit several times, and it'll keep telling me I have something wrong. And I go back through all the stuff that came before the submit button, and there's nothing wrong. And then I finally realize, oh, wait a minute. There's something down there that I have to enter. And the other one that catches me a lot is when people create forms, they will ask people for images. And sometimes the button to submit an image doesn't show up until I attempt to submit. And then it will show up. And then I hopefully will find a easy process to upload my image. And recently I created a form for my podcast, The Accessibility Advantage. I'm trying to get more organized so that I can put out more content without getting overwhelmed myself. And one of the things that a friend of mine, Leanne Reiber at Second Skin Society, it's a fitness app for people who are disabled, along with people who are able-bodied, that can work out virtually together with. And many of the instructors on the platform have disabilities. It's a really cool business. When I asked her to fill out my form, she says, "Max, this form is missing one really important thing." I said, "What's it missing?" She said, "It's missing a place for people to describe the image that they submitted to you as their headshot." And
Oh.
I should have thought of that, you know?
Wow. Oh, well, it's good that you tested it out with her. I mean, and I think
Exactly,
that's what a
yes.
lot of people need to do is test it out. See, does it make sense? Does it flow well for anybody, right? So having a button, too soon doesn't make sense. The instructions don't,
Yeah.
they don't make sense.
I highly
Yeah.
encourage people, test your own form, if nothing else. If you're not
Yes.
going to ask your friends to see if the form works, test it yourself.
Right. And see how think of yourself as using it for the first time, right? As I say, put a different hat on and and do that. Right. It makes such a difference, right? Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And don't be afraid to ask for help, because I asked for help in two different ways actually when I was building the form. The form is part of my CRM, which is with Less Annoying CRM, which is a very accessible platform. And I just finished a job for them, giving them some action items for their second annual accessibility week. I not only asked friends to try out the form and let me know what they thought about it, I had a lot of back and forth with the customer service person from Less Annoying, trying to figure out the ideal order, any additional explanation or descriptions, and rearranging some of the things, uh, changing the name, changing some of the instructions, and then making sure that when they completed the form, that it sent me the information and that it directed them to the link to book the actual podcast interview. So, this is a system I set up, but it's a system that we still tested from a couple of different approaches to make sure that it would work well.
Right. Yeah. You want to make sure that experience is as good as it can be. Yeah, that's great. I love that, Max. So as we wrap up, if my listeners only did 3 things, so you can think of 3 things this week to move accessibility forward in their organization or institution, what 3 would you recommend to someone?
I would say look at your website and look at your website and see if it actually is focused on what you do. Have you made the most important thing the most important thing? Because quite often, improving user experience for everybody will lead to improved accessibility for people with disabilities. So, are you focusing on the main thing? Can I quickly get to those main things? Second thing is simple design is best. The more complicated widgets and whatever you have on your website, the more likely you are to create an accessibility bottleneck for some of your users. And some of the things that cause problems for a disabled person can cause problems for mobile device users or for older potential users. So keep the design simple. And 3, take a minimalist approach. Look at every page on your website and think to yourself, does this information need to be on the website at all? Does it need to be on this page? Can I reduce the amount of text? Can I make the text plainer in its language? Can I reduce the number of images? Or if I have a slideshow, can I reduce the number of slides? If I have videos embedded in my homepage, are these videos actually serving the need of getting the customer to the final decision point? So I would say those are the 3 most important things. And I would say if you give me a fourth, it would be keyboard navigation first. So those 4 things would be focus on the most important thing, have a simple design, take a minimalist approach, and design for keyboard navigation first.
Wow, I love that. I'm glad you added that little bonus 4th one in there. That's good. I like it. Great. Well, Max, thank you so much for sharing your insights today. This was a powerful look at why accessibility matters and what organizations and educational institutions risk when they overlook it. And for listeners, this is part 1 of a part 2 series. So Max will come back, which is great. So in part 2, we'll get practical and talk through the best ways to make websites and materials accessible to everyone. Before we wrap up this episode, Max, what's the best place for listeners to follow you or to connect?
Right. I'm looking forward to that next one. I think especially talking about accessible documents along with accessible websites is going to be very helpful to people. And they can find me at theaccessibilityadvantage.com or on LinkedIn. I'm Maxwell Ivey, IV as in Victor, EY. And I welcome new friends and great conversations without scripts. So don't feel like you have to want to buy something, book me, or hire me in order to reach out to me. I look forward to speaking with some of your audience and sparking the desire or understanding to improve accessibility.
I love it. Great. Well, thank you so much, Max. I appreciate it. And we'll record episode 2 down the road. So I'll get all the questions ready and we'll hit the ground running with that one too.
All right. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Max. Appreciate it. Thank you for taking some time to listen to this podcast episode today. Your support means the world to me. If you'd like to help keep the podcast going, you can share it with a friend or colleague, leave a heartfelt review, or offer a monetary contribution. Every act of support, big or small, makes a difference, and I'm truly thankful for you.